So which part of being a businesswoman did you dislike the most?
By doing accounts, because we had to do the accounts ourselves. Just keeping stocks and making sure everything was balanced.
Yeah,
We had a guy, but
it's a creative person's nightmare. Yeah,
the day-to-day
absolutely.
stuff we had to do. So yeah, and Shani is very good with the marketing and sales, so that was kind of covered. We got a sales guy also, but she's been doing it for years with
Right.
Penguin and Scholastic. So that side of it kind of went smoothly enough. But the accounts, yeah, I had to do that. So I was a bit,
Yeah.
uh, you know,
Even now, even I, as a business person, my worst time of the year is the 20th, because the 20th is when the GST is due, and I have
yeah.
to work out the
Actually, the
GST.
GST was one of the things that broke our back, to be honest.
Uh,
Because when the
yeah.
GST came, because books don't have GST, so we couldn't do that. What's it called? We couldn't
The
get the money back.
input credit.
Credit. We couldn't get input credit, which meant that we
Okay.
had to increase the prices, which doesn't work with Indian children's books at all. So
Right.
that was one
Right.
one big factor in kind of pushing us out of the thing. And we really needed to expand. Really, I mean, we needed to find export markets, this and that, and we didn't have the bandwidth for it. So we found that we were
Yeah.
just getting frustrated and getting more and more bogged down in the things that we didn't want to get bogged down in, and not getting enough time to do the fun stuff and the joyous stuff. So yeah, that
And
would happen.
as an indie publishing house, so at your largest, how many people were you? Did you
Four,
roughly?
four of us.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Right from pretty much
So
early
then
on.
that
Because
really meant it fell on you. You couldn't hire an accountant or something like that.
yeah, no, we had a part-time accountant, but we
Okay.
didn't need daily accounting done. But
Sure.
it was
Sure.
just,
Right.
it was all very complicated. So we had a guy who'd come and do the accounts on a, whenever, as and when needed kind of.
Lovely.
But yeah,
Lovely.
but still,
So
we had
so
the track of everything, all the stuff, the
okay.
tax.
So from what you're describing, you were already at Scholastic and then creative.
I
So were you
was.
what were you doing? So were you an author first? Were you an editor first? What was your
My
first thing that you
own.
got into?
Right. So I started as an editor with Tara Books in Chennai
Okay.
many years
Okay.
ago. 1996, I joined them, and again they were tiny. And now they've grown a lot. That time they were just again 4 or 5 of us doing everything ourselves. Again, exciting times, because that was even more exciting, because in those days we didn't even have enough children's books in India. The
Yeah.
main
Right.
publishers doing children's books were CBT and NBT. So,
Right.
and then Tulika, strangely enough, Tulika, Tara, and Karadi, all three in Chennai, three independent houses in Chennai, came about around the same time. So, so we, so it was really a blank slate. It was a really
Okay.
exciting time. Anything we did, the problems were these, that people were used to subsidize books. So they were used to buying books for
Right.
like 30, 40 rupees. So they would say, why would a picture book cost 150 rupees? 150 they used to balk and pay. It's too much.
Right.
That we had to struggle against. But on the other hand, we had complete blank slate where creativity was concerned, because nothing was there anyway. So we could just do anything like Tiger and Tree itself, which was the first book that I worked on at Tara. I wrote it while I was there. It was
Mm-hmm.
quite a big shock to the industry, actually, because it was a black and white book with just a bit of orange. It wasn't a 4-color book. Whereas there's this accepted knowledge that children's books need to be 4-color. And we kind of went against that, and it never looked back. Tiger and Tree is still, I think, one of their bestsellers, and after all these years.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so that sort of thing, which you wouldn't think of doing if you already had a conventional market established, then you would try to
Right.
fit in that. This we could just create our own market in a way. So I
Nice.
joined
But
Tara in 1996, and then I wrote several books while I was there. Then I left, and what was I doing? Yeah, and then I came to Delhi and joined Scholastic for a few years. So, but that was the first stint, and then I left, and then we came back to Delhi again. See, the thing is, I've
okay.
always been at this push and pull against whether I want to, work, because on the one hand, I'm passionate about doing children's books and, improving the space itself. And on the other hand,
Right.
I wanted to
Right.
write. So every few years, I would
Ah,
get the writing bug, and I would say, no, 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 I think I should stop working and start writing. So that I did that several times in my career. I left,
okay.
joined, so, yeah, but always came back to publishing also because somewhere I felt that children's publishing needed, you know, a lot of work, needed more excitement. So
Right.
then when I came back to Gurgaon was when Shani had left Scholastic by then. She had joined ACK, and so that's when we kind of decided to do that. So, yeah.
Nice. What fun. So, did you like formally learn the craft? Did you go to a degree or get a credential, or was it just
Not
organic?
at all.
Did it just seep
No,
into you?
not at all, because my background is actually mathematics. I've studied
Oh,
mathematics.
what fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I used to be like completely maths and science person. But then I also used to like to write. So always that
Okay.
thing. So I was a programmer for a long time. For in
Okay.
early career was systems analyst programmer. Then I kind of got joined Tara. When I came to Chennai, I decided to do a switch and joined Tara as an editor, and then never looked back really. But no training at all. So the training is basically just reading a lot of, reading
Yeah.
children's books, reading comic books, all sorts of things. So I mean, as many of us here, I'm sure all of us who want to write, I've been a bookworm since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So that complete immersion is in reading. It kind of
Yeah.
naturally to writing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. I'm so glad that you stopped being an analyst because otherwise we wouldn't have had all these wonderful books. So, one of the things which is lovely about your books, and again, I can look for a passage or two, is the rhyming, right? So, Blanchety, Totem and Goo, the German is blicking, the Comet is Poo, Twickety, Twackety, Dillick and Do, the Flimball is chicking, the Wimbag is Do, Twickety, Twackety, Hollow Herring, I sing what I like, so I like what I sing, right? So there's a lovely music to these words, the way that they
Right.
flow together and the way that it just kind of comes together. And again, it's very reminiscent again of Dr. Seuss, and his sort of writing. So again, this was just organic. This just came out of having read stuff and it came
It
together in
came
your
out of
head.
actually loving poetry and rhyme and
Right,
nonsense. I discovered
right.
Lewis Carroll nonsense verse when I was in college, and I was really blown by the whole idea of nonsense. Because again, I think it comes a little bit because of my maths background. Because nonsense is basically about subverting logic. So
Right.
when
Yes.
so that kind of, I think, because Lewis Carroll was also a logician, mathematician. So
Mm.
I think that's why he appeals to me so much, because Edward Lear, who's also a nonsense writer, whose work I love, but I don't enjoy it so much as Lewis Carroll, because Lewis Carroll is language and logic is what he plays with. So nonsense has always been something I like, and also verse. So I seem to automatically start writing verse when I'm writing. So which is something we actually tell writers not to do, because it's very
Mm.
hard to pull off. Honestly, it's very hard to pull off.
Right.
So Moin was
Yeah.
very, very nice for me, because I created this character, the monster, and the monster likes to
Mhm.
rhyme, and the monster it is completely silly, so it can write any nonsense it wants,
Anything.
and
Yeah.
I could write any
Yeah.
nonsense I wanted and pass it off as the monster's nonsense. So that was fun to do, because I could just do what I wanted. Otherwise, you tend to have you need to reach somewhere. With this, I didn't need to. I could just let myself go. So yeah, so I've always liked writing verse, and I remember reading this. It was this Australian book called The Magic Pudding many many
Hmm.
years ago, with songs in it, and I really liked the format. So you have prose, and then in between you have poems and songs. So that kind of stayed with me for many years. So I think when I started writing Moin, which was after I wrote a lot of verse, picture books and verse, that kind of was also one of my something, that the memory that uh, triggered this idea of writing, of having verse inside them. And also the
Mm.
character. See, ultimately, the everything follows the character. So the character, once I created a character who likes to sing silly songs, then it was easy. Then I had to have silly songs everywhere. It was
Then you
sillier.
get the freedom to do
Yeah.
that. Nice. So characters and twists. So when you're starting to make a character, or when you're thinking about, okay, writing a particular book, like let's say Moin and the Monster, where does it start? Does it start with a premise or a theme, or does it start with saying, okay, I want to write a middle grade reader's book, or where does it start?
Yeah, if you've read Moin, you know it's impossible to plan that book. The only
Yeah.
thing I had was that idea of the monster appearing under the bed and being drawn into existence. Right, that was the only thing I had. After that, it was just me having fun, honestly, with the character. It was just that, okay. So this is the situation I created. There was this boy who's stuck with this monster. The monster is unhappy because he doesn't look the way he wants to look. The boy is unhappy because he really doesn't want a banana eating, shrilly singing monster in his life. And then, so that situation just kind of created its own comedy. And I just had real fun doing it, which is why it doesn't even
Right.
have a proper ending. And that was kind of deliberate. If you see the normal course of such stories would be that they don't like each other and they hate each other, and then like a love story, and then at the end of it they come
Yeah.
together and decide they want to be friends. I didn't want to do that deliberately. I didn't want to fall into that same kind of stereotypical
Cliche.
plot. So I
Yeah.
said, so at the end they just endure each other. They know that they're stuck with each other, and okay, whatever, we just have to deal with the situation, is how it ends. And yeah,
Ah,
and I really hadn't, yeah, that's the book. And I really hadn't planned to write a sequel. But again, when we started Duckbill, Sayoni was insistent that she wanted, because Sayoni and I met because of Moin. She was my
ah,
editor at Penguin when I wrote
okay.
at Puffin.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
so when we started Duckbill, she was very particular that we should start with the second Moin. And also by then I'd taken the rights back from Penguin. So we started with publishing Moin 1 and 2 together.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, the next question, you already kind of touched upon it. So we talked about characters and twists, but a lot of people think that children's books need to have morals. So what do you think of that?
I'm dead against morals of any kind, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how these children's books started, right? As cautionary tales, as moral tales, as things that, everybody, even now, that's the thing, it hasn't changed. Even now, people think that children's books should either
Have
inform
a
or
moral.
improve in one way or the other. So, and
Yeah.
I feel, why can't you just write books for fun, just for the joy of reading the book? It may not be joy in the sense of, it might be a sad story even, but the joy of hearing or reading a story, or just the joy of words sometimes, which is where I come from. Actually, I love the sound of words, which is why there's so much rhyme and sound words in a lot of my picture books, because I do love words and I love what words can do, both in terms of meaning and also in terms of sound. So that's the thing. So I felt that this is what I like, so this is what I want children to also read. So
Hmm.
I just feel that books should be fun to read. And I've come across this,
And
sorry, yeah,
no,
I've
keep
come
going.
across
Sorry, sir.
this question so often, because I remember
Yeah.
this, which I repeat at every time I'm asked to talk about this. So, excuse me if you already heard it. Once I was traveling in a train, and I had some of my books with me, and there was a young man in the train. He just got married or something. So he said, so we got talking as you do in the train. What do you do? What do you do? So I said, I write books for children. He said, oh, you write textbooks. I said, no, I don't write textbooks. I write books that, kind of fun, for the fun of reading. So I showed him one of my books. And he just couldn't understand. He kept saying, but why? Why would you write a book like this? It was one of my nonsense books. So he said, why? But why? What sense? Why would you want children to read this? I said, just for fun, just for the fun of reading, so that they realize that reading can be so much fun. Finally, he said, oh, I get it. You want them to get into reading so that they can then start reading real books. So this is an attitude that I always come up against, and I find it really funny. But honestly, I
Yeah.
just want books to be fun. And I think, we kind of, this keeps going up and down. So there's a point at which people were writing and reading books and not expecting them to be moralistic. But now I think what has happened is issues have taken over from morals. So every book
Right.
has to have some deep issue that it introduces to children. And we need those books. I'm not saying no.
Right.
We need a lot of those
Sure.
books. But I don't think those are the only books that need to be out there. I think they need to be books which
Of
are
course.
just silly and fun to read. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So I'm
I
sure
don't.
that your books can also be, subject to misinterpretation. Like Moen and the Monster was written how long back?
What, 2006? That long.
So
Yeah,
2006. So well before the whole current political crisis, right? But if I
absolutely.
read the book now, people might think that, oh, it's a Muslim character and Mr. What's his
Hi,
name? The father's name?
Kef.
Mr. Kaf. Mr. Kaf is such a nice man because he buys everything that poor people are trying to sell.
Yeah.
So she's trying to
So,
portray this Muslim man as a nice man.
eh,
So even if you don't intend it like that, maybe the issue will be
see,
put onto your writing,
I have to
even if you never
confess
meant
one
it.
thing, that I could have used any character. I could have used any character
Right,
because these characters are
right.
pretty much each of their religious thing, right? I haven't brought
Yeah,
because in school you
correct.
don't.
Yeah,
At least I growing
yeah,
up, I didn't. I think things are changing now, but when we were
yes.
growing up and all that, we didn't know, okay, what
It didn't
religion
matter.
you were,
Yeah,
what asked you, and all things are changing now. But so when the school situation, the fact that one is a Sikh and one is a Muslim and one is a Hindu really didn't matter. And I could have chosen to put any kid, but I honestly chose to put mine because this was post
okay.
Gujarat 2002 to be. So
Ah,
it was definitely a very, uh, you know,
nice, nice.
a planned
Yeah,
move.
but I'm glad that so while it's there, it's not like being made into anything. It's just there,
Absolutely. I just felt
and
that
I
there
think
need
that's
to be
wonderful. Yeah.
characters. Yeah, there need to be characters of all, all
Hmm.
again religions. I wasn't even thinking of all kinds in the book because
Right.
that's the kind of society we live in, no? With all these people,
Right.
all these Hindus and Sikhs and Muslims, everybody living together and sitting in a classroom, and that is not it wasn't reflected in books enough in children's books. So I just did that. Yeah.
Right.
And because I didn't get
Okay.
into anything religious at all, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. I didn't
Yeah.
need to know anything about how people live differently. Because
Right.
I know a lot of people who just they're just kids. Yeah, it doesn't matter where they come from.
Sure. Sure. Great. All right. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about where do you go from here? What's planned now? What's next? Are you so is there a particular genre or a particular category for which you always write, and is that where you want to continue writing for, or do you also experiment and do other stuff?
Yeah, I've done a bit of playwriting, but long back.
Okay.
I've not got into it after. I mean, after I think I got into publishing fully, I haven't gone back to playwriting very much. But otherwise, it's always children's books, and I do have a favorite age, which is around 7, 8, because I find that age really interesting. So
Right.
most of my books end up being for around the 6, 7, 8 year olds.
Right. Okay.
It's not really planned or anything; it just happens like that. I have written for slightly older kids, like the
Okay.
Arabian Nights that I did was for older children for sure.
So
What
by
kind
older, what age are we talking
older?
about?
It's
Is
around,
it
it will
young
be
adult?
around 13, 14. No, 13, 14. I think it's Arabian Nights, but yeah,
Okay.
I would say around
Okay.
14ish would be the age for that.
Sure. Sure.
Um,
Okay.
and I've written one detective story in an anthology, which also is for that age. But otherwise, it's mostly been smaller kids and even younger. Like
Okay.
the picture books in verse have been written for really small children, like 5 and all
Right.
that, 4 and 5.
Okay.
Again, see, this age thing changes from child to child. Like the new books, the Smarty Pants. When I wrote them, I was thinking of ideally a 6-year-old this way, that way, right? But so many parents are saying their 5-year-olds like it. So many parents saying their 9-year-old likes it. So it varies so much from child to child that this age banding is anyway slightly problematic. But so you
Right.
write.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you just write what you want to write. But I think the important thing writing for children, if you want to write for children, is that you need to be able to get into the head of the child, you know,
Yeah.
and that's not always easy to do. A lot of adults have completely left their childhood behind and cannot go back to that. I think that is an essential characteristic that you need to have as a children's book writer, that you need to be able to
Sure.
tap into your childhood and go back to how, because otherwise what happens is that you are writing to a child out there, and the moment you're
It's
writing
top
to a
down.
child out there, you talk down to them, and that's the worst thing you can do in children's book.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, cool, great. So, so what we typically do is I have some questions. So we've had that part done. Now I'm gonna we there are already a lot of questions on the chat. So I'm just gonna run through these questions. I'm gonna curate them a little bit, and I'll just run through them because sometimes there are repetitions and all. Um, so the first question is, what is the difference in marketing children's books compared to other books?
Yeah, so children's books, first of all, you're not selling to the reader. You're selling to the readers, parents, selling to the librarians, you're selling to the teachers. So that straight away creates one level, a kind of gateway that you have to cross. And
Hmm.
that actually is a problem, because a lot of times a child might enjoy the book, but the parent might say, no, no, buy a more sensible book, or buy a more the parents' own interests come into it,
Yeah,
right? So the parent likes
yeah,
history, then they'll say buy historical. A lot of times they want children to buy only non-fiction. So we used to go to the book fair, and we've seen all kinds of parents coming. The
right,
child sometimes is drawn to a particular book, but the parent will say, no, no, not that one, buy this one. And it's really sad when that
right,
happens, but there's the first problem that you have. There's a big difference between selling children's books and adult books, because you're not selling to the final reader. Um,
right,
yeah. Well, secondly, then, you need a lot of institutional sales to
right.
actually make this work, because again, unless the books are visible there for children, where do they get to know about the books? They need to be in the
Yeah,
libraries, they need to be at the book fairs.
yeah,
So that is another important. But yeah, and there's not enough space for reviews of children's books in the papers and all that. So actually, this is one big problem that we find, is that we don't get to know about the children's books that are there in market. Me being in the field, I don't know which are the books being published by different publishers today. So we
right.
had kind of worked on this problem at Duckbill by starting a blog, where every month we asked all the publishers to send us their latest books for that month, and we would
Okay,
read them and put little just a
Just-
small write up about the book. And every month we had this happening, so that if you went there,
nice.
then you knew what are the new books that were out in the market this month for children.
Okay,
And that was a great
okay.
thing. But when Duckbill shut down, we had to shut down the blog. So that's that. And we're really hoping somebody else would pick up on the idea and keep it going, but it's not happened so far. So that these are the
That's a thought for
major
us.
challenges. But I think when you talk to Shiny, you will get a better picture of the marketing thing, because she's really been doing this for much, much longer than I have.
Okay. We should talk offline about this because we would love to take it up. We
Oh,
have a
really?
blog and we
Oh,
always,
that would
yeah,
be
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
So, but we'll discuss that.
Great.
There's somebody
Great.
who's saying the download link to the email is expired. So Penguin had given us the download link for a week, so it might be over.
Oh,
So we'll
okay.
get a new one made and we'll share it with you all so that you can still get access to the books. Next question is from Khubi Gangdev. She's saying, how has the children's book publishing landscape changed over time in your experience?
Oh, right. So it's changed quite dramatically, and definitely for the better. Because like I said,
Okay,
when we started, we had only NBT and CBT books around, and there were no really good quality books that could compete with the books in the international market. And that was changed by, Tara, Tulika, Kardi. And that has, that's it's kind of uh, had an effect on the entire industry, because now you find some really lovely, lovely books. The other thing that's happened is that you have a lot of really young writers experimenting with interesting subjects and interesting forms. Now I just read a book written in verse, a fantasy book written in verse by Varsha Sheshan. Nobody would have tried that a few years ago, so that way I think it's really improved. I feel there are, because of the online spaces, the social media, there are now groups of parents who are really looking for children's books for their children, and they really proactively looking for different kinds of books and stuff like that. That all that has changed. But I think we still have a way to go, because you look at the number of schools and children in the country, and you compare that to the actual sales of children's books. There's still a way to go, but it's been
Yeah.
definitely a dramatic difference since the time that I started, which is really heartening to see.
Okay. Great. Next question. While writing your books as a writer, do other roles that form your hat have a say? How do you deal with that? I'm not sure I understand this question. Arun, maybe you want to rephrase the question and put it again. We'll move to the next one from Mangesh. It says books like Enid Blyton, Mark Twain had a simple storyline with good character development, which was very much okay to understand. However, today's generation of kids, is it okay to introduce multiple story elements like crime, more of sci-fi, more of technical words, and twists at the climax? Will today's kid generation like it? There's an assumption there. I don't know if that's true. But he's saying
Uh,
that you have to have a more complex story for kids to like it today. Is that true?
I think, see, I think there are, the thing is, we also tend to generalize too much about children. So
Yeah.
children are as different from one another as adults are different from one another. So there may be a child who finds certain stories too simple, and there may be a child who finds crime and all of that too much for them to deal with. So I think we need books for all kinds of readers, whether they are, and I think there's space for all kinds of books in children's
Right.
book industry. You need to have historical fiction, you need to have science fiction, you need to have fantasy. So there are a lot of kids who don't like fantasy and they won't read it. That's fine. But there will be a lot of kids who do. So you need to write for every kind of child. Basically, you write for the kind of child that you were. So if I would never write a horror story, for instance, because I cannot read horror. But there'll be somebody who likes horror, they will write a horror story. So you write for that, you write the books that you would like to read. I think that's essentially what we do as writers. The moment you start thinking, okay, this is what the market needs, so let's write that, I feel there's
Hmm.
immediately a gap, and that shows in the writing, because then the
Yeah.
writing is not, it's not
Authentic.
spontaneous, not
Yeah.
organic.
Yeah. Right. And I think that, if you look at stories, the most enduring stories are often the simplest ones. So you don't have to unnecessarily make it complex,
Yeah, yeah,
thinking that
yeah.
our kids really need all these things. A simple
Correct.
story works. I mean, even Moin and the
Correct.
Monster is a simple story. It's been
Yeah,
around for, like what you're saying,
yeah.
whatever,
I
15,
mean,
17 years, and it seems to be
it's
going
still,
great.
it's still
Yeah.
one of my
Yeah.
best-selling books. It's got nothing.
Next, there are a couple of, sorry.
No, no.
There's an interesting question. Do you think children's books need to be censored for good or bad language?
Ah. So this is again something that we come up against every now and then. Like I said, we have these gatekeepers who decide what children should read and what children should not read. And the biggest gatekeepers are the schools and the principals and the teachers. And sometimes it's not because they believe that, because they're afraid of the parents. So I personally feel that, I mean, yeah, you're not going to use the F word in a book for a 7-year-old, for instance. That much
No.
common sense is there. But
Yeah.
I think what you need to keep in mind is use the vocabulary that you think that a child would use. So
Yeah.
when you're writing for young adults, for instance, they use a lot of bad language, if you can call it bad language. So if you don't use that, then you're not being real. You're not
Right.
representing them the way they are, because if that is how they talk, then that is how it should be written. So I
Yeah.
feel that that's the only thing that you need to do. Would a child of that age and that context also talk like that? That's the only thing that you need to have in mind. Anything else is, I think, we are forcing our ideas of right and wrong on the kid.
Right. Yeah. Next are a couple of observations. People are saying they agree about, not going into morals. Vidya has asked a question. Could we know the name of the detective story that was part of the anthology? You mentioned a
The
detective
detective
story you wrote.
story. There's a book called Sherlock Holmes Connection that we did at Duckbill. It was actually, we had 2 Swedish writers and 2 Indian writers, and we decided that Sherlock Holmes would be the connecting thing, because we all knew, it was common, everybody knows Sherlock Holmes. So it's called the Sherlock Holmes Connection, and it had a my story. Now, what was it called? I can't remember the name of my story, but it was about. It was set in the emergency actually. So what we did was that we divided it up in time also. So the first writer wrote a story that was set earlier in time, like 1940s or 50s or something, and I chose 1975, and then there was the next period and the next. So I chose that period, and so my story was actually about the emergency and a boy whose father was a journalist, and so there was a detective thing involved in it, and we also brought in Sherlock Holmes's, or actually in this case Watson's, descendants into the story. So it was good fun to do. So, yeah.
So I'm sure that Sherlock Holmes connection, if you Google that
It
along with
was,
Duckbill, it should do it.
yeah,
Yeah,
penguin. Yeah,
cool. Right. Then the next question was, what child archetype did you use while writing? So you've already sort of answered that.
yeah. No
But
archetype. Yeah. So no archetype at all. The archetype is the problem because children are just individuals, right? They're not types. So they're all different kinds of children. When you're writing an adult book, you don't think of an adult archetype like that. You think of people. So it's the same thing, children are just individuals. And I think that's how you should see them. I think it's very, very important to see them as individuals and not as types and say kids like this and kids do this, because they don't. They are all very different.
right. Next question is, are there any India-based workshops to help improve the manuscript that you recommend?
I mean, off and on, there are people doing workshops. There are a lot of workshops being done online by, I know Varsha's station does them. There is another group, whose name now I've forgotten. They do workshops as well. If you want, I'll just figure out a list, Chetan, and send it to you, and you can share it, because there are people doing workshops. They're all mostly, then Squibby, that is Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, does workshops once in a while, but not, yeah, we do sessions of like you can submit a manuscript. It's called first page. So you submit the first page of a manuscript, and a panel of editors and people will tell you, publishers, editors, whatever the panel is that day, will tell you whether this works for you. Because quite often that's all you have when you write. Sending something to a publisher, what you have is your first few pages and a synopsis. So it's important to learn how to do that, how to present that.
Lovely. Sure. So if you can put a list together and share it, we'll be happy to put it in the WhatsApp group, folks.
Sure.
And we are thinking of doing a writing workshop for authors of kids books and YA books ourselves. We haven't yet finalized anything, but so if we do one, we'll let you know. It's not nothing certain yet, but we've been thinking about that for a while. So yeah, we might want to do that ourselves. Next question is, how do you start writing a book?
So this is a this is a question that I think varies from book to book and author to author. So I have a lot of author friends who think that I'm really lacking in discipline, and they push me to write. Like, they write 500 words minimum every day, sometimes more. I know writers who sit at their desk every day like it's their job. Which it is, and they sit and write something every day. I really lack that discipline. I think it's to do also with the kind of books I write, because if you're writing a plot-based book, it's easier to do that because you already know what you want to, where your book is going, you know where it's going. Whereas for me, my books many of them are very mood-based, So I cannot put a time, sit down at a particular time and start writing. It doesn't work. I've tried it. But on the other hand, there are books that I've written which are like Sherlock Holmes Connection, for instance, which needed a plot because it's a detective story after all. So it needed a proper, coherent plot, and it needed planning. So in which case I start with the plot and then start writing. With Moin, like I said, I just started with this Moin character and the monster, and then I just let it go where it took me. I just went along for the ride kind of thing. It varies from book to book. Like I remember Zain and Anna, if you read those books, it's a set of chapter books that I wrote. And the idea was to just write about two children and their world, and how children's worlds are very, like there's a very thin line between the fantasy and reality. So you're they very easily cross that line. So when I started writing, I did the same thing. I started without planning it at all. But when I reached about
Okay.
halfway through, I knew that I needed to know the end to keep going. So sometimes that happens. So I started writing it, and then I had to stop and think about what the rest of the story was going to be and then continue. So it varies from one to the other. Sometimes something just, just something you see or read or hear just sets off something in your head. Like a lot of the books that I've written, like I've said, are picture books in verse. So they're kind of short books. So so they need that
Right.
really strong energy and focus to just finish it, because otherwise you can't write it in bits, basically. So there was this, so different things inspire you, right? So Catch That Crocodile, if that's one of the books that uh, I wrote, it was my second book actually, after Tiger on a Tree. How that started was that I heard about, we were in Baroda at the time and there was a flood, and the Baroda Zoo had a lot of crocodiles, and the crocodiles rose up with the water. The water rose above the fencing of the zoo. So they escaped. And when the water went down, suddenly
Oh, wow.
all over the city, there were reports of crocodiles in one well, in a ditch. They were kind of stranded here and there. And then how people reacted to them. So that's what that book
Okay.
turned out to be about. So what do you do with an animal that wanders into your space? So different things. People want to be violent, they want to kill it,
Right.
they want to do this and that. And then finally a child says, just send it back to the river. So each book comes from a different
Right.
place. So yeah, I think the thing to do is just be open to stories. And I
Right.
think you find that when you're thinking of writing something, the universe gives you the ideas as well.
Right. Vidya has a question about newspaper articles, so we're going to skip that. Sunita saying she can relate to children. That's great. I'm just coming to questions. We have very little time, by the way, folks, so that's why I'm going to rush through some of these. What is the ideal chapter story length for young readers? Do you feel kids will not or cannot read longer books, or is it just something that parents feel?
Yeah, see, depends on the child, I suppose. Here typically a chapter book tends to be quite small, like the length of mine. Slightly older, maybe bigger. This is the book that I was telling you about, Uncontrollable. It's about this thick, but it's easy to read because it's verse. Then there's these are for slightly older children, middle grade kind of thing. So here I find that in India, books tend to be a little smaller, because for some reason, when you have bigger books, the trade also objects, says that this is too big. No kid is going to read it. Whereas in the West, like if you've read the books of Frances Harding, which if you haven't, you must. Fantastic books for any age, but they're written as middle grade books and they're this thick and they sell like
Okay.
anything. So it varies. I think in India, particularly, the books tend to be a little slimmer. And the whole books that we did at Duckbill are just about 5,000 words, I think. They were
Okay. All right.
they are chapter books, but slim chapter books for children who are just beginning to read chapter books. So it depends on
Right.
that as well. So who you're
That's
aiming
great. Divya has a question. Thank you for that. Divya has a question. While writing dialogues for children characters, is it okay to deliberately make spelling errors or show that the particular character, being a child, is pronouncing that word incorrectly? Firstly, would you do that? Because I didn't see that in your writing. And the next question is, how much will be too much?
it depends on the child, right? So if you read Roald Dahl, there's a book he's written about a dyslexic child. So in
Hmm.
that, obviously, there's a lot of that dyslexia that comes into the conversations. So you
Right.
wouldn't, yeah. So it seems a bit like it seems a bit patronizing to do that to all children, because there are all kinds of children out there, and some children speak really well. Like my daughter, when she was 5, she was speaking like a 40-year-old. So it depends on the child. I think a lot of times you'll find that And also, see, this again is a problem. We did this really lovely book called the Flat Track Bullies. Flat Track Bullies. Okay, it was a middle grade book written by Balaji Venkatraman, who wrote. It was about this bunch of kids in Chennai. And you know, the typical Chennai kids who are being sent to this class and that class and the other class. And then this boy plays hooky and goes to play with some street kids. So he's written that in a kind of English. Even the English is really reflective of how Chennai kids speak English, right? And we found amazing the way he got the cadence of that language. But again, people don't like it. People in India, especially parents and teachers, want books that are written in correct English. So
Correct
there's that
English. Yeah.
problem. Yeah, but I feel that we need books which reflect the way children actually speak. So I would say go for
Right.
it.
Right. Great. So, folks, we're almost done. I'll maybe take one last question, and then you can save your questions for the next session. We'll be having Sayoni, who is Anushka's partner in crime, next next weekend. So maybe, but Sayoni is more of an editor and less of an author. But I'm sure after so many years in the industry, she will also have a lot. So last question I'm taking is from Manish. He's saying my son Samay is 11. He's published his first book recently. He wanted to be here today, but it's his best friend's birthday party, so priority. Any advice you have for children writer that I can share with him? His book is called The Farm Five: The Mystery of the Strange Carpenters.
Very nice. Congratulations. But the fact is that, see, when we were at Duckbill, we used to get a lot of submissions from parents sending their children's work. And to be honest, we saw them in the same, like we would say, is it as good as anything we would publish? Like we would
Right.
not publish something because it's been written by a child. We would publish
So it
something
has to be
because
market
it's
ready.
good. Yeah, marketed, and also just has to be a good story. I think children, they have their lives to develop their craft. So there's no hurry.
Yeah.
If your son has written a book that's really that so good that it could be published, then that's lovely. But not all of them are there yet. I mean,
Right.
you can imagine as a children's book writer, I get a lot of these things from friends whose children write and all that. And I found that most of them are really good. And you can see there's a lot of promise, but they have a long way to go. So sometimes when you publish them too early, you're doing them a disservice, because
Right.
then you're not giving them the space to grow into their writing. That,
Right. Right.
that's personal opinion.
Okay. Great. Well, so there was one question, sorry, which I had missed. I'm going to come back to that. But there was a question about, will self-publishing a child's book work, and will that get the kind of visibility, and will that get the kind of exposure, not the financial side, but will that find readers, given that kids may not have access to Kindle? So do you think self-publishing a children's book will work?
So a lot of people do, and there are a lot of these organizations now that actually run for this particular purpose of taking children's books and publishing them. Again, I can find out the names. I can't remember them offhand. But there are these publishers who are doing just that. They're taking children's books, you pay them, and they publish it for you. But again, my question is, what are you doing this for, right? What are you doing this for? Is it because I feel it puts a bit of pressure on children, to want one child's book is published, so every other child wants their book published.
No,
And
no, sorry,
I
I
think
should rephrase the question. The question is for books written for children, not
Oh, sorry. Okay.
book.
I thought
Yeah.
children, because there
Yeah.
are a lot of children's people publishing children's books written by children,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
being self-published. It's a little industry by itself now, because
Okay.
parents want to do this, so they're willing to pay the money.
Sure. Sure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
children's self-publishing for children's books, again, it's there, but I'm not terribly well informed about it. Maybe you could ask Shani when she comes on, because I know there are people doing it, but
Right.
whether it will reach people, I think Amazon, uh, I think older kids it will reach. Younger children, I would say no. This is my
Let's. Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
Maybe young
Let's.
adults would reach. Yeah.
Let's save that question for next Sunday for Sayoni,
Yeah, yeah.
and try and pop your questions in early, because I think the questions that come in early get taken. The ones at the bottom sometimes get left behind. So yeah, that's it for today's session, and thank you so much, Anushka. I will be in touch with
Thank
you
you
one
so
on one.
much,
We'll
Nikhil.
talk about the blog,
Apologies.
and
We will definitely.
yeah, and if you can make a list of places, resources where people can learn, workshops or any other
Workshops.
forums, that would be really helpful. It'll be knowledge for us also.
One place that usually has all this information is Reading Raccoons on Reading Raccoons on Facebook. I think there's a one for children. So that's Tanushri Singh's. She runs it, and usually any information about workshops happening and all that you'll find it there.
Okay. All right, great.
That's
We'll also
great.
check that out, and you can also make a note of that. Reading Raccoons on Facebook
Yeah,
for
yeah. There's a
children.
senior reading raccoons for adults. There's a reading raccoons for children. It's a good space
Okay.
also
Yeah.
because there are a lot of book recommendations, all sorts of things that keep happening. So it's nice.
All right.
Okay.
Lovely. All right. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much
much.
again. I hope you get well soon. And
Thank you.
we'll all catch up again
Already
next
feeling
Sunday, 5
better
o'clock.
after being here. I said I'm already
So,
feeling better.
so for
This.
lovely, lovely.